welcome to Macros with Mythili, the ET Now show that takes a hard look at all the major macroeconomic issues and developments in India and overseas. This week we're going to take a hard look at a potential development, the end of a close to 100-year-old tradition of a separate railway budget. The railway budget was separated from the union budget through the Separation Convention of 1924, and that practice continues to the present day. However, the Modi government is reportedly toying with the idea of ending that practice for a variety of reasons that we'll discuss over the next 30 minutes or so. And who better to discuss that with than the NITI Aayog member and main author of the report recommending just that change, Bibek Debroy, and former Financial Commissioner, Indian Railways, R. Sivadasan. Welcome to the show, Bibek, Mr. Sivadasan. Let me start with you, Bibek. The broad thrust of your report, if I understood it correctly, is that the idea of a separate budget, as suggested by the ACWORTH committee, was to ensure full autonomy to the railways in managing their financial and general railway policy requirements, taking into account its commercial considerations. And since this objective has not been served, why continue with the practice? Logical question, except that isn't it a bit like throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Rather than scrapping the rail budget altogether, shouldn't the aim be to try and allow the railways more autonomy and allow it to run on commercial principles? Bibek?
Well, let me state it a bit more accurately, because the way you have stated it is probably not the best of ways to state it. Every organization will have a budget, and the railways will continue to have a budget. All that is going to change is that budget is not going to be presented in Parliament. There is neither a legal nor a constitutional requirement for the railways to present their budget in Parliament. Presenting the budget in Parliament often means that the railways cannot function according to commercial principles because populist pressures begin to creep in. Add to it the fact that amongst the 25 odd recommendations of the ACWORTH committee, the only one that was accepted was this separate railway budget. So therefore, the objectives of the ACWORTH committee in terms of having a railway budget, a separate railway budget, were never accomplished.
Mr. Sivadasan, you've been Financial Commissioner with the railways, so you know how the railways functions, the inside out as it were. And you're also retired now, so maybe you can speak, more frankly, really, speak your mind. Would you agree with Bibek that the railways have simply failed to live up to the ACWORTH committee vision, and now there's very little reason to treat the railways any differently from other departmental undertakings of the government? Or do you believe that all is not lost and it is still possible for the railways to make a grab for independence? Agreed, the railway budget is presented in Parliament and that adds to populist pressure. But surely that's equally true of the general budget. Democratically elected governments are always subject to political and populist pressures. Mr. Sivadasan?
See, railway budget, if you are abolishing it as a measure of administrative convenience, it is, that is fine. See, in 1947, the railway budget was being read by a career civil servant. Subsequently, the luminaries like Madhudan Vate, down to present gentleman, he is an excellent minister, Mr. Suresh Prabhu. Fine. Suppose if tomorrow, if it is read by the finance minister, after transfusing the existing railway budget into a 15 minutes presentation and put it into that, nobody is going to quarrel about it. The question is, how does it prevent the railways from performing very well as a commercial organization? Now, let me ask, I want to present 2 or 3 things to you. Right now, the total revenues of the railways is 23 billion. And its profit is 1.2 billion. In the Fortune Global 500 group, if you let's see the list, the last firm, 500th one, is making having a revenue of 20 billion and a profit, very small profit. So only 4 railways are coming into that list: Union Pacific, then Japan Railway East, SNCF, and one more railway. See, if we corporatize the Indian Railways and list it in the market, this will become the 8th company from India, which will be in the Fortune 500 list. Why I am saying this is that, how does the railway operate? you say that you shall have this much of revenue, and thou shalt meet all your working expenses within this, the total working expense within this. Thou shalt do all the debt servicing that has to be done in respect to the railways, and even the government budgetary support that is being given to the railways is a loan, which carries an interest rate of 4%, which is not a low interest rate compared to what European Union gives to the European countries, and even American government provides this. So, thereafterwards, you say that you shall pay your leasing charges. Then you say that thou shall generate a surplus, net surplus. Right now, Mr. Suresh Prabhu is making 10% net surplus as compared to your total revenue. See, when you carry 95% of the total people whom you are carrying in a year, happens to be you are doing business with the bottom of the pyramid. So, their paying capacity is limited, and therefore, there is a parliamentary oversight to see that the fares are commensurate with the quality of service that is being provided with. So, in such an organization, how do you say that it is not being allowed to function with commercial focus, or it is not functioning well? But the point is, yes, we need modernization, we need money, we need private investment in this, and we can bring in many other ways, keeping the same organizational structure as it is. Nothing is preventing you from doing that.
Okay, so it is not as if all is lost, and you could manage even if you continue with a separate railway budget, is your point. And Bibek, you're right. It is true that railway budgets have tended to be populist and more often read like election manifestos, with railway ministers using the opportunity to favour their constituencies. But is that the fault of the railways or of the mantris and the governments of the day? You've had rail mantris like Lalu at one end, and you also have mantris like Suresh Prabhu at the other. And if you look at the long line of rail mantris, the politicization of the railway budget really happened only in the mid-1980s with Ganikant Chaudhary, I think. Surely that can change if the PM steps in and sends a clear message that the railway budget is not meant to be used for narrow political ends. Is that not possible, Bibek?
I would suggest that everyone reads Dinesh Trivedi's speech, railway budget speech. I think the year was 2012-13. Why am I mentioning that? Why am I mentioning that? The reason I am mentioning that is this is the first time a railway minister stood up in Parliament and said what happens if you become a railway minister and if there is a separate railway budget. He listed out about 5,100 requests.
Okay.
What were those requests? Those requests were for stops. The railways have a commercial criterion for testing for stops. That commercial criterion is violated because of these requests. These requests were for new trains. The railways used to have a criterion for doing a proper cost-benefit analysis for new trains. Did they do that? No. These requests were for passenger fare concessions. I am sure anyone who has worked as a financial commissioner in the railways knows that the general category second class passenger, the 95%, does not avail of these passenger fare concessions at all. It is very easy to malign the political class.
Okay.
It is also the case that in not a single instance has the railway board stood up and said that this is the cost-benefit exercise, these are the costs of introducing a new train, these are the costs of ensuring a stop at a place where there should not be a stop. These are the costs of setting up a manufacturing facility where it should not be set up. These are the costs of passenger fare concessions. It is precisely because the railway bureaucracy has gone along with the so-called populist sentiments of the railway ministers that we need the systemic change.
Okay, yes, it is true. It's easier to malign politicians, I agree. But Mr. Sivadasan, how easy is it really for the railway board to stand up to the mantri? If I remember right, one of the rail mantris, and I think it was Ganikant Chaudhary again, he actually sacked the entire railway board. So is it really idealistic to expect the bureaucracy to rein in an irresponsible mantri, or is it not possible at all given our systems?
It is not let us not generalize it that
Okay.
the railway boards have been agreeing to whatever the railway ministers desire to do. Let us take that, I will not name the minister. The time when we were there,
Okay.
we had a lot of differences with the railway minister. It is on file. What happens is that these projects are to be cleared, and the Indian Railway, as a financial commissioner, I have never given the clearance for this. Many of them, many of them. As a railway board, we have not given the clearance. As an expanded board, including finance ministry representatives and planning commission representatives, we have not given the clearance for these projects.
Then how did these happen?
But that is the play of parliamentary democracy. I am not blaming any politician for it.
Okay.
They will say that if you don't want to clear it, you say that. You record your views.
Okay.
I will take it to the cabinet directly or the economic affairs committee directly, and I will get it cleared.
Okay.
Most of the projects have been cleared through that route. Of course, mercifully, right now, Mr. Suresh Prabhu is not
An
towing this
exception,
line.
yes, that is true.
That is a ray of hope for the railways. So if we get a minister like Mr. Suresh Prabhu, things would have been much different. They are like Mr. Trivedi, who had, who had a very good plan. He had even convinced the common man to see that a little more if you pay, you will get back commensurate to whatever you are paying.
That's true. Actually, the bureaucracy often is overruled by the
we cannot say all the politicians are bad. There are good politicians, and many of them were listening to us also. Many times, my minister said that, okay, I want to reduce the tariff per passenger by 1 rupee. Okay. We told him that it is not a wise idea to do that, but then he insisted upon that. But you must understand that we have made him sign 2 more proposals to agree to levy a rail development surcharge. And also one cess I wanted to continue, it was expiring. We got it signed by him. He said, but I will sign it outside after the budget is over.
Okay,
fine, that is fine with it. Yeah, fine. Let us take high-speed railway.
Okay.
The minister said that I am a low-haired socialist. I don't agree with this. It should not be in the budget.
Okay.
We said that it will be in the budget.
So it really is a battle of wits.
It is not that railway, we are just towing their line.
No, so just as you have good mantris and bad mantris, I suppose you have strong bureaucrats and weak bureaucrats. But I'm afraid on that note, it's time for us to slip into a very short break. But please do stay with us. We'll be back very soon. Welcome back. You're watching Macros with Mythili, and we're discussing the proposal presently before the government of scrapping the separate railway budget with Bibek Debroy, member NITI Aayog, and Mr. Sivadasan, former Financial Commissioner, Indian Railways. Vivek, you've criticized the railway budget for being populist and for not being able to ensure that projects are completed on time, etc. in your report. But this is an accusation that can make with as much justification about the union budget, isn't it? Successive governments have used the budget as a platform to announce populist schemes without much regard to the economic rationale, and many projects are also not completed on time. So why change a system if the new one is not going to be any better? That is my fundamental point.
Who said the new system is not going to be any better? I will go back to the ACWORTH committee. Amongst the recommendations of the ACWORTH committee was that the railways should switch to a system of commercial accounting. It has been 92 years. Have the railways switched to a system of commercial accounting today? The answer is no. Let's also get the background very clear. Most people are not aware of this background, so I'm mentioning the background. The East Indian Railway Company's lease was being renewed in the year 1919. That was the reason for the ACWORTH committee. That is the background. The legacy of the railway budget is a colonial one. The dividends that the railways ostensibly pays to the union government is not dividends at all. It is a repayment of interest on capital, on a loan in perpetuity that the union government extends. The antecedents of that go back to the Indian Railway Companies Act of 1895. So the broad point I am making is all of this goes back to a colonial legacy. It's completely outserved its purpose. Had with the railway budget, the railways been able to change, they would have done that by now. I suggest that everyone who argues that the present system will enable the railways to deliver a better system of passenger services should read a note that was written in the year 1954
Okay.
by the then railway secretary, saying that the present system is not going to deliver. And I find it a colossal joke that even now we are debating and saying that the present system will deliver when we have the evidence of 92 years that it cannot.
That is true. We don't have any evidence that the present system will deliver. But my question was, we're not very sure whether the change and making it, scrapping the budget per se itself alone will deliver. Because in fact, Mr. Sadasivan, Bibek is not the only one actually to make the case for scrapping the separate railway budget. The Rakesh Mohan committee also had suggested just the same. But, and I quote, it said a key milestone of great symbolic value would be abolishing the railway budget. If action on the legal framework and corporatization is initiated immediately, the railway budget could be abolished by 2002. This, mind you, this is talking about then. But clearly the scrapping of the budget had to be preceded by corporatization, something that Bibek also mentioned. And that hasn't happened as yet. So which should happen first? Should we scrap the railway budget first, or should we first have corporatization?
I think scrapping the budget as an administrative measure, that is a matter of convenience, administrative convenience, is not a bad idea at all. Number two, what should proceed? The budget, abolition of the budget should proceed.
Okay.
And corporatization may follow. But because we need more money to invest in this, we need more money for modernizing the railways. But the question is one of this, that there is a talk about commercial accounting. We have been hearing this for quite some time, but I would now like to tell you that the Indian Railways accounts which is prepared and presented before the Parliament, that is called the appropriation accounts, where the CAG uses the word very carefully, net profit. He is auditing these accounts. Who prepares the accounting structure, architecture of this country? It is the Comptroller and Auditor General of India. And when he is the one who has to audit it also. We started the accounting reforms, we came to a certain level, and we then have to send to CAG, and CAG will decide as to what should be the changes in the architecture of the whole thing. So, do we mean to say that the same railway budget which goes and gets merged within the within the general budget, what we are presenting by the Government of India, that is the sovereign way of presenting the accounts, is a wrong thing. In that case, let us ask CAG also to constitute a committee to make the changes. It is not a question of any railway ministry or anybody, any individual ministry appointing an internal committee to say that, okay, chartered accountants or whatever it is, you make these changes. But everything will have to finally go to the CAG to make these changes. The process is underway. But we can't say that the existing system that is being followed is not conducive to conducting the business in a commercial manner.
And we'll come to the issue of the manner of accounting, both of the railways as also of government in general. But Bibek, your report, you also spoke about the need to ensure that the Indian Railways remains an empowered ecosystem which could then fund its capital and operational and maintenance investment needs all by itself, and at the same time provide a fair and reasonable return to the government on its investments. But the concept of a reasonable return, indeed of returns itself, is somewhat alien to government spending. In many cases, it is socio-political externalities that determine investments. So, for instance, you might want to invest in railway expansion to parts of the country where investment itself does not make commercial sense, only because you want to ensure connectivity. So, doesn't that always become an issue even if you corporatize? One cannot use the same yardstick. Would you agree, Bibek?
I am not going to use the word corporatization, but I am going to respond without using the word corporatization. And I will start again with commercial accounting. There is a consultant's report delivered in the year 2005-06. Have the railways acted on it? The answer is no. Why am I flagging this? I am flagging this. You mentioned externalities. Of course, the railways talks about social cost obligations. You will find a figure of about 26,000 crores a year.
Okay.
But do I have any satisfactory basis of estimating what the true social cost obligation is? The answer is no. Do I know how much it costs to run a train today in India, passenger or freight? The answer is no. So it is all very well to say that the union government should compensate the railways for the positive externalities, namely the social cost obligations, but I need to know what that particular figure is, which is why in our report, the main report, we had said we need an independent regulator, and that independent regulator will also check the social cost figures. We need accounting not only to attract private investments, we need accounting to know what the proper rate of return is on an investment project of the railways. It is also the case that before the DFIC, for about 15 years, multilateral funders had refused to fund the railways because we do not know what the rate of return is on a railway project.
Oh yes, it is in fact very difficult for us to find out what the rate of return on railways projects, or in fact any of government's projects itself, even the road project for instance. But Mr. Sivadasan, can't many of the problems, and Vivek also mentioned this, can't many of the problems associated with the economic viability of operations be tackled once we have an independent regulator? In fact, what is the position on the ground? It's been a long pending proposal. It's well known that the burden of revenue generation has fallen on freight, rendering the railways very uncompetitive. And will this change post scrapping of the railway budget, or does the answer really lie in having commercial accounting, independent regulators, all of which perhaps can it be done with the existing system?
No, here is what, this is the reason why I agree with this abolition of the railway budget. One advantage when we, we draw this railway budget from the scene, all these projects will now go to EFC. There is a committee of the Expenditure Finance Committee, which makes its recommendations independent of course, the department will be consulted, and then that will go to the cabinet for approval. So there is one big benefit, so that the railway ministers will be completely, will not be allowed to have their say in this whenever it comes to supporting a proposal which will be constructing a railway to nowhere. There are a lot, of course, in a parliamentary democracy, there will be demand for railway lines being set up in backward areas.
But why hasn't the regulator been set up?
Definitely, we can set up that regulator.
No, but why that's an old proposal. Why hasn't it happened as yet?
It is on the move. It is on the move. And the regulator, once he comes into position, it is a double-edged sword. Let me tell you. He is not going to agree to the tariff that the railway ministry is going to ask for. He will say that, what is your cost? Let the railways prove. That is a good benefit, good spin-off from the way in which you set up the regulator. It depends on how much power are you going to give it to them, or rather empowering them with. So when it comes, these are all welcome features. Nobody is saying that. Nobody is saying that it is incorrect. Let us also see this point that when an area requires a development, and if the government is convinced that to open up that area, let us take the railway line there, even if it is below the expected levels of investment return, that is 14%. So these reforms can go side by side. Railway budget can also be removed from the scene, not an issue. But the question is, the new setup should ensure that it should work as efficiently as it had been of the board which is right now there.
Mr. Sivadasan, according to Bibek, in fact, the greater attention given to the rail budget has in fact led to its politicization. But on the contrary, does it not raise a level of public scrutiny which is unlikely to happen once the budget is scrapped? Does anyone know what happens to the postal department? What is its operation ratio? Very quickly, can I have your response to that?
This is an absolutely good thing that you have mentioned it. See, India is the only country where there is a separate railway budget. Why? The best of the countries like democracies, large countries like America, USA and UK, you can't move a paper to construct a new line without converting it into a bill and move into the Senate or the Congress or the Parliament, in UK the Parliament. So it will be debated, various parliamentary committees will go into that, and then the whole process will be then put to public consultation everywhere. And even a man who says that not in my backyard, if you are going to acquire land, even he is listened to, every issue is settled, and then we do it.
Okay, so
here there is nothing. Here it is a question of using the budget as a vehicle to put a bundle of projects into that, and then quietly make a discussion and then get it passed.
Okay, so there are pluses and minuses.
There are advantages in doing that,
okay,
provided you create a mechanism by which no railway line can be moved, can be constructed or proposed without moving a corresponding bill for that to support it.
Okay, so there are pluses and minuses,
Yes.
but I'm afraid we've run completely out of time, so we'll have to end this discussion. As to the question that we started off with, will doing away with a separate rail budget make the railways any more agile and efficient? I'm afraid we're still divided. Bibek believes it will, and Mr. Sadasivan is not entirely convinced. And neither am I, for that matter, for the simple reason that one's not very sure whether we're moving into a better system. If we can, that is certainly better. But for now, we'll have to wait and see whether the government agrees to that proposal, and the change, if and when it happens, will it be for the better? Will it be a case of out of the frying pan into the fire? Thank you so much, Bibek and Mr. Sivadasan, for joining me in this discussion. Thank you also for watching. Remember, we'll be back next week with yet another edition of Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/etnow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at etnowlive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/etnow.